Well, Rachel, thanks so much for coming on. Looking forward to this one.
Thanks, Josh, for having me.
No, very welcome, very welcome. If you could just give us a bit of a run through about your kind of career and what's got you to kind of where you are now and kind of the real passion behind kind of mental health that you have at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much. Yeah, so the latest kind of the stage that I got to, I was at the NHS for 6 years and I worked predominantly as a project manager in quality improvement. And during the pandemic, our team were dealing with major incident management to help coordinate that. So I spent a lot of time in that major incident room. And, I was watching people who I've known for years who are, really resilient, experienced doctors and nurses, and they were doing amazingly well, but you could see it was impacting them in a way that maybe their job had never done before. At the time I was training to be a yoga teacher, and I was studying trauma informed yoga, and there was a feeling, there was a kind of suggestions from all around in the public and in the just round and about, that there might be quite a lot of PTSD. And I thought, maybe there's something for me to do here. Maybe this is a bit of a calling, that I've got these tools. I need to do my trauma-informed yoga and work with everybody who's been affected. So all great ideas are that, great ideas. The reality was, it wasn't as straightforward as that. So I left and I started offering free yoga to anybody in the NHS, but most people were too busy, or the time wasn't right, or one of those, or maybe they thought it was too good to be true. Can't be free. So did the yoga, was all good, but then spoke to somebody at the hospital who said, listen, could you come in and do some yoga, maybe practice and talk about relaxation and all that good stuff with some of our preceptee nurses. So those are the nurses who are just coming through. And it happened from there that we started building workshops with them. So I was using all of that quality improvement, project management, all the skills I'd had, using them in the hospital with people and teams that I knew, and then bringing all that information and that wisdom from how yogic practice and breath work and meditation, and how to calm the nervous system and really make yourself physically resilient. And that's kind of how it came about. So we start from that point, a company called Rejuvenate Corporate kind of came out of that. So there was Rejuvenate Yoga, and then it was like, okay, let's do Rejuvenate Corporate. And we've done a lot of work with nurses right across the board, from new starters to people who've been working in the NHS for 27 years. So that's been the most of the last year, and it's been so rewarding and so amazing, and humbling. And I think that generally, most of the feedback has been really, really great. I think people appreciate having a bit of having space to be able to talk and feel heard.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then from that point, we've got into mental health first aid training. So we were already doing mental health awareness, and now we've got that, and we can give people certification if that's what they want as well.
Yeah, no, amazing. No, that's really cool. And I think sometimes people just find things work and they have a calling, and it's like, just sometimes it's just meant to be, isn't it? There's a part your life takes a direction, and I think you just got to run with it sometimes.
Absolutely, and you just hope it's the right direction.
Yeah, you got to try, right? Always believe you got to try. In terms of just going back a step, in terms of the mental health first aid training, what is that? What does that actually kind of look like in terms of normal first aid training sort of thing?
Okay, yeah. So there are a few different companies that are quite big in the UK that are offering this, but they do follow the same sort of outline and the same purpose, the same methodology. So effectively, it's bringing awareness to people, because we're not all, this is a very small part of the population who are mental health nurses and psychologists, and so it gives us a real foundation to understand how it works. And I think the big one for me, because I thought, well, I know a lot about well-being and I understand how it all works, but the big thing for me was right at the beginning when they said, there's mental health and then there's mental illness, and these two are separate things. I mean, they can cross over, but mental illness is that it's a diagnosed ongoing, or it's an ongoing issue that would get a diagnosis or does get a diagnosis, having a problem there. mental health is something that we all have. We all have health. We all have physical health, and we all have mental health. It can be good, it can be great, it can be amazing, it can be not so good. And I think that was a big aha moment for me, because I thought, well, that's sort of like our well-being, isn't it? Really, our mental health is like, well, how well are we? Are we feeling good? Are we okay? So I think it's a big step, and it helps with stigma, I think, as well, because I think older generations, like my parents' generation, there was enormous stigma that is kind of lessening nowadays. But yeah, so the big take on it is basics like that, which is, we all have health. So you could have in one day great well-being in the morning, and then because of a load of things happening, it might not be great in the afternoon. There's no stigma attached to that. It's just how you're feeling.
Yeah.
When you have like an ongoing period where that well-being and that feeling of those feelings of wellness aren't great, that's when we have a bit of a problem. So I suppose the other takeaway is giving people the ability to recognize when it isn't great, and so that there's no stigma, you are open to recognizing it, so then you can do something about it before it becomes a problem. And it's like a gift we can give to everybody, I think.
Yeah, no, amazing. And it's kind of, I went to a workshop, when was it? 2 or 3 weeks ago. And part of that discussion was kind of around your physical health, your mental health, the link between the two, and kind of how a lot of people focus more on their physical health, like going to the gym or going for a walk, but actually forget to say the mental side of things also needs a similar training and input to kind of exercise that equally.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in some ways, I think it's harder, isn't it, to monitor that, because you can get so, if you say, right, every day I'm going to go to the gym or whatever you're going to do, or on a Sunday go for a walk. But it's so easy nowadays to have spent the week at work, and then you sit down to have a rest, but you pick your phone up for a text message. And then before you know it, it's an hour later and you've been watching and consuming so much content. And when you're doing that, you can be kind of unwinding, but you're not really calming the nervous system to the point where you are revitalizing yourself and really getting that deep down rest. And I think that's the place that we're at, where there's a danger that you're not really getting any real deep down rest.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. So no, that's really cool. And then in terms of kind of, you talk about, doing the training and stuff like that. In terms of how do you work with, so is it just the NHS you do at the moment, kind of nurse, or do you work with more different forms of organisations?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the other areas where we have been working is with hospices, and that has been,
Oh wow,
again,
that's
really
a really good one.
amazing. So when I was at the hospital, we did lots of different projects, but some of my main projects were around touching on end of life care. So, and the people who work in those areas are just formidable. It really, I think anybody who works in care is amazing, because it's really demanding on more levels. And I mean, if you were, for example, and I've done it, you're working in an office, and I work with a finance team once, and you go to work and you can get tired, and maybe you get a bit stressed with deadlines. It's not quite the same if you've had a day where you've been caring for somebody who then passes away, because that impacts you emotionally, and potentially, whatever you're going to call it, spiritually, or whatever it may be. So people who are doing that have a whole different level of kind of experience and delivery, and also that it can impact on their well-being. It's a big thing. So with hospices, so hospice teams have been amazing. That's, I've got to say, one of my favorite clients. And then companies, small to medium size companies locally, and that's where we're going into even more now at the moment. So it's been quite exciting, but a very different audience with very different problems and experiences.
Yeah, and I guess that regardless if they're in the care sector, the NHS or hospices, or every individual's different, every environment's going to be different, and that each are going to have their own challenges, regardless. Which I think is always a good thing, though, isn't it? To kind of go in and be able to help different types and different forms of people.
Different types of people. But I mean, I guess it's like with recruitment as well. you have to see the individual, don't you? It's about the person. So getting the right fit when you're placing somebody is about understanding who they are. And
Yeah.
we do that when when you walk into a room of people. I try and keep the groups under 12 people, ideally, if we can, so that then you can kind of read the room and understand, because you're going to have your introverts and your extroverts, and you're going to have people who are massively supportive of what you're doing, and other people who are a bit like, well, I'm not sure whether I really want to be here. And I think the key to it is to make sure you're delivering the best to those individuals, but also to the client, is to make sure that everybody in that room becomes engaged in a way that they're comfortable, so that when they leave, they've got something from it. And my aim is to make sure that when people leave, they've got a new life skill in some way, that they've got my background is about improvement. So I did service improvement and then quality improvement. And it's all about continuous improvement, which on a personal level, I think is like about growth mindset, really.
Yeah.
Which is really, really, it's the world we live in now, isn't it? I mean, it's, if you're interested in self-development, or you're an entrepreneur, or you're a business person, everybody is trying to improve themselves. And it's about that. It's about bringing the latest knowledge. And I mean, I read lots of books, as you might have noticed. And, I love it when a new book comes out and there's a new kind of theory or an idea. And I think, right, I'm going to get the book, I'm going to read it and see if I can, if it's got, real value in it, bring that into what we're doing and then recommend that. And so that's part of it as well, book recommendations and ideas to hopefully enhance people's lives.
Yeah. And no, you're spot on. And it's definitely in the world we live in. Do you think there's not a danger, but do you think there's also the issue with social media around, you got, telling you to nothing? I think reading books is great, but reading books or do breath work or visualization, have cold showers, wake up at 4 a.m., do this, do that. There's kind of an overload that people think if they're not doing that, they're failing. That causes that
Absolutely.
anxiety and stress
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
puts them in that place. What's
In
your
itself,
opinion around
it's an
that?
extra. Absolutely. Absolutely. So there's like an extra pressure in that, isn't there? That, I'm not doing all of these things. And I think sometimes, if you are, we all know people, don't we, who said, well, I've tried it and I've done a week of it and I feel awful.
Yeah.
I've got up at 5 o'clock every day. I've had my cold shower. I've been eating whatever it is, porridge or what, and I feel dreadful. But you're right. I think one of the things that we do talk about when we talk about well-being and self-care is finding something that works for you, and actually being able to say, give yourself permission to buck the trend and actually say, do you know what? I'm not doing it. This doesn't work for me. If it does, then great. But we talk about that quite a lot, which is that we've got to give ourselves permission to say no. We've got to give ourselves permission to say that doesn't work for me, or I do normally do it, but actually, guys, I'm really sorry, but I'm not doing it today. I know that we said that we'd all walk together because we're doing it for our well-being, but today I just need a day where I am staying at home and just not doing anything, whatever it may be. So absolutely, I think overwhelm and expectations are potentially two of the big factors that are impacting people's mental health, ironically. So I think you're right. It's finding manageable ways of living, isn't it?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think everyone's, yeah, like you said, like everyone's different. For me, for example, I look to go to the gym 3, 4, sometimes 5 times a week.
Yeah.
I like to get up early to go because then I can help get the kids ready for school. And I like to keep to a certain routine because it just helps me get my day set up. But also, if I can't get up because I'm tired, then it's okay. Like, it's cool. Don't worry about it. We'll go again later. Like
Yeah.
it,
Exactly.
it doesn't
Exactly.
matter. And I think, yeah, people just put too much
Too
pressure on their own
much.
shoulders, where it's just
Yeah.
like, it's okay if you didn't go today. Nothing. What's the worst thing that's
Right.
going to happen?
What's
Literally
going to
nothing.
happen? Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And then resting when you need to. So listening to your body, which is what we teach in yoga. When I started really going to yoga classes, and there was a lot of this stuff about, right, listen to your body. And I was like, what? What? I don't get this. What is it saying? I don't know. or being in touch with yourself, or the other one that we do with yoga is a lot of grounding. So you're standing on the ground, and you're really making contact with the ground. You're pushing your feet into the ground, and we take the strength and we come up through the body. And again, in the beginning I was like, I don't get this, but then with time, I think with practice, I'm feeling that was feeling calmer and happier and more centered and all those kind of things. I was thinking, yeah, there really is something in this. And that listening to yourself is so important, because I think in life, like when you're a kid, you're told, right, sit down at your table and don't move. And, at the classroom, don't, and at work as well, especially with the nurses, they're on their feet and they maybe need to go to the loo and have a drink of water. And it can be 2-3 hours later when they actually get to do that. So we're kind of taught to not listen to our bodies and not listen to ourselves is so important. So I think you're right. I think when we put everything else, don't we, before, well, you'll be the kids, it could be your responsibilities, it's your job, it's deadlines, it's emails, it's all these things. And actually, if we do have that practice where we are listening to our body, then we get into that habit. You're building that muscle where you suddenly go, well, actually, no, I need to just stop now. I need to just stop and listen to myself. So, but yeah, I think especially for people who are really busy, who are in care and working in care and nurses, and when you're caring for other people who have urgent things that need to be done, you get into the mindset of always putting yourself last. And it's not a really great sustainable plan, I don't think.
Yeah, no, and I think environments need to change, and I think they are. My partner works as a teacher in a SEN school.
Oh wow.
And yeah, some days just comes back and it's got nothing left in the tank. But
Nothing
even
left,
in
no.
school environments, if you sit down for 2 minutes, someone's got eyes on you because there's something else that can be done. And I just think, it's not, I just think, obviously, I know it's been that way for a long time, but just kind of moving forward in the way the world is and people are these days, you just don't feel like there's no sustain. You burn people out, and then that's why you're struggling with staffing, recruitment, retention.
Yeah.
And there's an obvious reason why people are leaving sectors. It's because they haven't got anything left to give.
I absolutely agree. And I don't know how. You kind of hope that with time that will change. I can't see it changing right now because of the way that things have come together. And I think we are feeling pressure on the economy. And I think and culturally things have come to a place. But when you look at the NHS, and I'm guessing and also with schools, when you talk to teachers, those pressures, and people now are probably, you get the impression that people are doing maybe the jobs of 2 or 3 people.
Yeah.
And so in comparison to like the 1970s, I'm guessing it feels like that, or the 1980s. Well, how long, as you say, is that sustainable? And people can go for a long time. But I mean, even I always say this, that you think, well, if you're really, really, really resilient, then people think, you should be able to keep on going. But in America, I mean, the amount of doctors, I think this is something ridiculous. Like, is it something like 1 in 2 doctors in America experience burnout throughout at some stage of their career? These are people who are high achievers. You look at soldiers in the army. I mean, people who go into the army are the most physical and mentally resilient people we have in society. But after they've been in, what percentage come out and do experience a level of PTSD? So we're all human, aren't we? And there's a limit to what we can do. And I think I think people talk about it now, don't they? They say, let's stop glorifying being busy. Let's stop making this like an accolade that if you just go you keep on going like a robot indefinitely, that's something to be celebrated. It's not. It's not right. So I'm with you. I think, how long is it going to be before it changes, though? Is it going to change? Is it a generational thing?
It's one of them who really knows. You just need, and I think the great thing is about, people like yourself is, and I think it's bringing awareness to it, is that, it's not going to change anytime soon, but there is support out there that which I think needs to probably be, people need to be more aware, and it's, I just don't think there's enough said about that, even in schools, kind of, it's like, or even in the NHS, or even in a care home, for argument's sake, there should be signs around, right, we have partnered with these people, go and speak to them if you need this, that, or do you know, I just think there needs to be a bit more awareness around well-being support, and it's okay if you're having a
Yeah.
bad week.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think awareness is definitely the thing, because this is a statistic that I've come across, so it may be wrong, and please feel free, anybody out there, feel free to challenge. But I read something like the uptake of employee assistance programs. So an employee assistance program, I know in the NHS they have them, they buy into them, and it gives you access to online counselling and benefits and that kind of thing. The uptake nationally or generally is 5%. Now, that probably went up during COVID because we got used to accessing things remotely. But I mean, companies, businesses, organizations spend a lot of money investing in this, in employee assistance programs, thinking it's a solution, that it's there to give their people support. But the fact is that unless people know it's there, and unless
Yeah.
they're reminded it's there, unless they're reminded how
And
to use
encouraged,
it,
like,
courage, yes,
because I
yeah,
also find, and I've seen it, a lot of organisations now are using that sort of platform to.
yeah,
But it's also kind of, oh yeah, can you not do that when you're at home later? Like, yeah, and then no, I've got to go and put my kids to bed. I've got to then cook dinner. So it's actually, oh, we want you to use it, but it can't interrupt our time. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's another big factor around using it. And I know there's got to be a bit of give and take, and you can't take
yeah, yeah, yeah,
advantage,
yeah.
but ultimately, people then, if you have a really busy job, they're the people that probably need it the most. But then they're going home to do something else. They don't, when do you know what I mean? And I think that's
When do you
where
get to do
there
it?
needs to be
Mm.
some support around the when, the how, and the why sort of thing, maybe.
I think absolutely. I think you knocked the nail on the head there, because otherwise people just aren't going to access it. And the idea is it's going to be something that they can use before they fall over. If you don't give them that opportunity, then they are going to fall over, and then things, the wheels come off. So yeah, I think there's a lot around, and that. So when we do the sessions, just to kind of bring it back, but whether it be the mental health first aid training or just mental health awareness or well-being or whatever, we always go through the signposts. So whichever organization you're working with, find out before we go in, what is your EAP, how do you access that, and then bring it to people's attention. And when you're standing there and you say, right, so does everybody know that you have an employee assistance program? And it's frightening because you can be in a room of 12 people and one person says yes, and you think, oh my goodness. So it's really important, and I think you're right. I think it's about having that human discussion, isn't it? It's about having that, if everything's done online, a lot of training is done online, and I think there's definitely a time and a place for that. But the most powerful stuff is when you have that face-to-face interaction where people will remember when you talk about a story, or you ask them to tell you about their experience and you put it into context. And you can say, right, well, when you did it like that, what happened? Okay, well, the outcome was X, Y, and Z. Right, well, what if you use this method next time? Walk through it now with the person next to you, and then they will remember more than just doing something online on a computer. And I think it's the same. Let's talk about what is available to you, what is out there. Would you use it? No. Okay, well, why wouldn't you use it? Okay, well, there are different things, so which one would fit you best? So then when they do come to that crossroads on that day when they are struggling, number one, they're aware of what to look for, and they suddenly have that aha moment, which is really difficult, isn't it?
Yeah.
A lot of time in life that you don't realize until it's too late. You have the aha moment, and then they've already walked through it in their mind. Okay, in the event I was in this position, I can access this service. Oh, I remember, I just need to go into that portal and I click on that. Oh yeah. So it's that human discussion, I think, to help them to get there.
100%. And I think, yeah, the more people that talk, the more people that bring awareness to it, then, hopefully in time you'll see that, small improvements. And I think that's all we can hope for, the small improvements, and keep moving in the right direction. In terms of kind of organizations, you've got an investment piece, which they obviously, an organization needs to invest money into this. Are you, from what you've seen, is that a problem to get the buy-in, or is it the fact that organisations think, they won't use it? That's they're fine. Is there kind of where are you finding it on that side of things?
It's really interesting, actually, because I think there is a bit of a divide in a way between people who get it and those who don't get it, if you see what I mean. So when somebody's had somebody, so it might not necessarily be the person themselves, the individual, the manager, the owner of the business, but when they've seen it in their own life and they've seen somebody, whether it be a child or a parent, a brother, sister, friend, struggling, then it's really important and they're invested. And when you speak to those people, they are really keen to put something in place and share that. We did a little survey the other week of small to medium businesses, speaking to them about how important, whether they would buy mental health first aid and that kind of thing. 90% of them said it wasn't a priority, that they wouldn't buy it because it wasn't a priority. Which for me, who's really passionate about making sure we get this kind of thing to the right people who need it, it's the kind of thing that I will lose sleep over, because I think, wow, I'm passionate about, obviously for me, this is something that I want everybody to have. And you think, well, people who are in that position, they might never have needed anything like that, but it could be, the reason is because they're in a good place. And, there is correlation. There are studies, we know the facts that if you are experiencing financial hardship, and we have had a cost of living crisis, that you are more likely to have struggles with your mental well-being, and anxiety, depression, that kind of thing, which is quite understandable. It's a human reaction to being under that level of stress. And so a lot of people who are earning more, who maybe really are smashing it out of the park and who are having a great time, and they can afford their holidays and their weekends away and their spa days or whatever it be, or their golf membership, or all of these lovely things that allows them to look after themselves and have the downtime, they're looking at it going, yeah, great, but I don't see the benefit. It's not a priority for us as a business. But I think what they're missing is that 1 in 4 people, possibly more in this time of of that we're living in, is experiencing a mental health challenge within any given year. So therefore, if they've got a team of more than 4 people, the chances are there's probably going to be more than one person there who could really benefit from it. And they may be people who are really struggling with the cost of living crisis or whatever it may be, or their children have had struggled over lockdown. We're seeing a lot of that, a lot of people who've got teenagers who are really struggling with their mental health. And that obviously is going to affect.
Do you think that's bounced on from COVID and the kind of...
Yeah, I mean, we talk to a lot of people that we work with, and we kind of do straw polls, and that is something that is coming up in, really, it's come up in, I would say, probably every session that we've done. Now obviously we're dealing with, this is where we're talking to people who've got teenagers. Now I think it depends on their age when they were in lockdown, but it's been enormous. I think the kids have missed out on some of the fundamental social developmental stages, and it's caused some enormous social anxiety to go back, and their coping mechanisms haven't been great. And we know, I mean, here in the area where I am, that the mental health services for the kids is absolutely oversubscribed. It's falling over. And actually I saw an article it was back in November, but in the press, and I think it was in the Guardian, I think, and they were saying, that I think it was something like they were saying at the time that the measurements was 50% of kids, of teenagers, were struggling in some way with depression or anxiety.
Yeah.
You would hope now that that's starting to fade off, and it's getting better. And I think it will, but it really, really did hit people hard. From
90% is massive to think that they think it's not a priority. I would always assume it's more going that way than that way, but 90% is much bigger than I thought it would have been.
It's enormous. Now, obviously, if you're a statistician, you'd look at it and go, well, maybe, the sample that you took and all that kind of thing. And if you looked at a different group of people and maybe asked the question a bit differently, it would be different. But so it isn't easy. You do have to speak to people and convince a lot of people that it's the right thing to do. The people, as I say, who do really want to invest in it for their staff are the ones who've had a personal experience. But and they're the champions, aren't they? But
hopefully they can champion future people to kind of push, go down that route. Because I think, people need to understand, and, whilst, you might get Big Chief, he's very comfortable, you know. But even if you just look at the news, there's still the cost. People are still struggling with cost of living. Homelessness is through the roof.
Yeah.
Children's, like you said, children's mental health. You know, there's wars going on. Like the world, it's a scary place at the moment, and people worry about that, and that impacts
Yeah.
their at work. And I think you've got to understand, just because it's not on your front door, maybe, doesn't mean it's not happening. And I think that's the biggest picture, isn't it?
Absolutely. And then it kind of comes, I don't know what you think, but nobody's ever said this to me directly, but sometimes you wonder when people say, we don't need it. My team's doing great. It's not something that's a priority. You kind of think, are they feeling that it's not their responsibility? I can imagine that for some people, and it's a question, isn't it? It's a question. It's like an ethical, it's a big question, but whose responsibility is it? Because it does feel in some ways that some of it's been pushed back onto businesses. Now, I have my opinion, which is all very pro businesses. Yes, definitely. My take is it's everybody's
Yeah,
responsibility. We have one. Yeah. What do you think?
I think so too, and I think ultimately, well, the way I look at it, I've only got one employee at the moment, but the old business I worked at, we had about 10. But I also feel like if you're bringing them on board, I feel you have a sense of duty and a sense of care for these individuals, and also for the fact that they're human beings, and you want them to, I want whoever comes to this business to succeed and to have the
Yes.
platform and the
Yeah.
support. But also, if you look at it from, they don't, you get some businesses, but then even if you look at it from a business owner that's all about business, surely you also want your best people happy and firing at all cylinders, because then your business is going in the right direction. So for both, whatever angle you look at it, it's a benefit,
It's a
surely.
win-win. It's a win-win. Surely.
I
Exactly.
don't
Exactly.
see, there's not a negative, as far as I'm concerned, there isn't a negative. Apart from
No.
you might need to put in a bit of money to get a
Yeah.
program
Yeah.
up and running. But I just think you get the,
But the thing is, yeah, and I agree with you. But actually, the cost of it, and I know that because I've looked at the market costs of what people are charging for the training, it's not expensive at all. And if people do it, it's valid for three. Well, hopefully, if you do it well, it's a good training because you bring in lots of examples and things. It's going to be there for life for them. But the certification is valid for 3 years. So, you could split the cost per person over 3 years. It is nothing, it is negligible. So that's the bit I am struggling a little bit with, because I'm like you. I'm like, well, it's a no-brainer. Why wouldn't you want it? So I don't know. I'm not quite sure if anybody's got any insight into why
yeah, no, I
maybe.
think it's just, I, d- I don't know. It's one of them. It's a tricky one because things can very easily be taken out of context. People kind of don't like too much of the because you hear reports that people don't do it because people then use the mental health card too frequently now, and
I
they
wonder
don't
whether
want
that's
to
it.
do, and they don't like,
Yeah.
they like, if you need a bit of time off, you've got your annual leave, that sort of thing, use it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
where, and I'm not saying I don't agree with that. Your annual leave is there for you to have some time out, but then you also then get businesses that call them when they're on annual leave, or can you check this email when you're on
Yeah.
annual leave?
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
and I do think potentially it's thrown around a little bit too much, possibly, but
Yeah.
ultimately,
Yeah.
you know, there's also people out there that do need it that are potentially not getting the support they need because not everyone's believing in it. Maybe.
Yeah, but now that I think about it, there was somebody last year that when I spoke to them, I can't remember the details, but it's kind of coming back to me that there was a bit of a concern that it was an HR person, and we were talking about it, and I got the feeling, or either she said explicitly, is this going to increase the amount of people who are going to be saying, I need a mental health day off, I'm not feeling great, that I need to have time off, and there was that worry that bringing that level of scrutiny and interest to mental health might cause them problems in terms of increasing sickness. But really, the idea with it is, and as we've just spoken, I mean, for example, what you talk about is accessing the EAP. Well, you're supporting the employer because they've invested in that, and you're really helping them to make sure that their employees use it. And I agree with you. I think that in a few of the recent sessions that I've done with nursing educators, there has been some discussion about people who were at university during COVID, who again have been impacted by that experience, and their take on and their focus on mental health. They've, they've experienced that there's a number of people very preoccupied with their mental health, and I think there's levels of anxiety in the groups that we were talking about, and maybe some social anxiety, and maybe some confidence building that needs to happen there. So when we went into subsequent sessions after that, what we did is we talked with the junior nurses, and we were saying, look, yes, of course, you've got to look after yourself. Yes, of course, you need good rest. But actually, the best thing that we can do for our overall mental health, and again, I'm talking about mental health and well-being. I'm not talking about specific mental illness. That's to the side, something else. But is to build our resilience and our confidence, and we all need to do it. We all need to do it. That's about life, isn't it? Life is about becoming the best people that we can be, and trying to get the best out of our skills and our abilities so that we're happy and we can help other people and make a great world. And if we all did that together and we all backed each other up, there would be a great recipe for a very happy planet. So yeah, we're saying to them, look, the idea now, because you do worry that the message that maybe has been out there is that if you're not feeling well, then you need to retreat and get under a duvet, and that everybody needs lots of mental health days and duvet days and this kind of thing. That is not where we're going. And I think going forward, you're quite right. We've got to challenge, if that is the perception, we need to challenge it, because even if you are feeling very anxious and maybe depressed, we still have the ability to, we need to work on our mindset. We need to look after our bodies. We need to look after our minds. We need to look after our spirits to get better. And doing nothing isn't going to help you.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I've known people to be signed off for stress, maybe, and and it's they just get on with their days like they're on annual leave, sort of thing. Which to some extent is fine, but also, what are you doing about it? What's going to stop you from being here in 6 months' time, 12 months' time, 2 years' time, when it just hits you and you don't realise it's creeping up on you? And I think resilience is the key. Really, it's massive, and we're seeing that with our little boy. Is kind of and we got our 5-year-old whose resilience is through the roof, like nothing impacts her whatsoever. And then we've got our 7-year-old whose resilience is just not at the same level, and even and it's just building it up slowly, but it just is
it's a muscle, isn't it? It's like a muscle.
It's massive if you've got good resilience. And obviously I think you can be sometimes too resilient and not accept that you need to slow down and you need to do some work. But I think if you've got that tool kind of in in your toolkit, I think it's a really powerful thing to have control of, isn't it? Really,
definitely. And I suppose it's like that's the other thing that I think I want to give as the kind of gift to people, is to give them that awareness that you need to, it's about that self-care. It's about that proactive, preventative, preventing things, because if by the time somebody gets to the point where they're at burnout and they're falling over, it's not going to be a nice experience. So we want to avoid it. And if we've got the skills and the knowledge to say, look, anybody has this give you the toolkit, you'll know when to recognize, or what to recognize, what to look out for. Look after yourself and do it. Be proactive. Sorry, excitable dog. Then you can help prevent it. But it's like, you wouldn't say to somebody, listen, it's all right to never clean your teeth, but when they start rotting, we'll start doing something about it then. But you're right, that was the other thing, that when people go off sick, and that's the education bit that we can give to people, if somebody is in a really bad place, they are really bad, and their doctor has advised that they need to take a little bit of time off, as does happen, you're absolutely right. Just staying at home and doing nothing and doing the same that you always do isn't the recipe. You at that point, and that's what we teach as well, at that point, then we're going into major self-care then. We need to recognize it. We need to do something about it, because you want a solution. It's not going to help you or anybody else if you don't have the tools to be able to do something about it for a sustainable solution.
Yeah. No, and I think it's, it's people just don't like accepting that something needs to change, or potentially they need help with this small part of their life, or maybe a bit more support on how they look at this sort of thing. And it's definitely difficult for people, and I do get that. But I think I think the more, as we've mentioned, the more awareness, the more kind of support within organisations, because people in organisations more they're at home, right? So support has to come from organisations, because that's where they spend all of their time.
Or the best of your waking hours are spent working. That's the
Yeah,
truth of it, isn't it?
there's no
Yeah.
point having a sign at home saying, make sure when you can barely keep your eyes open, just walking through the door, like, oh, I've got to cook dinner now, do the washing. You need to be
Yeah.
at home when you're functioning, at work, sorry, when you're functioning, and
Yeah.
that's where the awareness piece, I think, is
Is
um,
definitely.
best,
Yeah.
best supported. So no, but no, that's no, really, really kind of interesting stuff in terms of kind of, we'll look to wrap up shortly, and it'll be good to jump on another
Yeah.
one at a later date, as this
Be
subject
great.
changes quite frequently
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Um, where are you guys looking to take Rejuvenate Corporate, and where's your kind of journey heading towards?
Yeah. Um, I think we want to take it where it's needed the most. But then, as I said before, sometimes you don't know. But so we want to take it where it's needed the most. I think there is still a lot of, I think personally, I would say that there's a lot of need for it in the care sector, massively, enormously, especially, well, my area of focus has been in the NHS. And I think the feedback that you get from people, the impact that it has on the lives of individuals makes me think I've got to keep on doing this. This is what we need to do. So in a room of people, you'll have, obviously, as with anything, there'll maybe be a few people who have found it interesting, but they didn't really need it. Generally, we always do say if you've got a group of people and there's somebody who's really not interested and they really really don't want to come, we don't force anybody to come. But then out of the rest of the group, there's going to be some people who find it interesting and they have some takeaways, and hopefully later in life they can use it. But you will usually have few people who come up at the end and they'll say, I really needed that, or I want to tell you about something, and you come away and you think, right, okay, we've given them some signposts, we've given them something that they can work with, we've given them some inspiration, all that kind of thing. So NHS for me is a really big one, but it's a big organisation. They have their own health and wellbeing teams, and obviously resources are tight. So that is a challenge. If the opportunity is there, that's where we would like to be. Carrying on with hospices, because as I say, it's one of the places that are very close to my heart. I think they do a fantastic job. And equally any part of the care sector. But going into small businesses as well, because as I say, I think that if you are a manager and you're absolutely thriving and you don't have any, reason to, as I say, not everybody, if you're a manager, you're not going to necessarily notice that there are people in your team that might need a bit of a hand. And generally, within any group of 12 people, there are going to be people there who need it. So really, um, forward-looking businesses and businesses that are really interested in making some magic happen, then obviously that's exciting, because the more enthused people are about working with you, the more you're mutually going to get out of it, I guess.
Yeah, no,
Um,
no, spot on. And just one last thing, and it's be
yeah,
interesting to see what you think of it. Is do
yeah.
you think it's been? Do you think this remote working has impacted a lot? I.e., how can leaders really feel or see how their employees are feeling when they don't see them?
It's really interesting. Yeah, I think it's given us a great opportunity and an amazing opportunity, um, because it challenged everything for us, didn't it? I mean, it's put everything on its head. And I know there's a lot of people who worked in hospitals and in care who never got to work from home at all. So to them, it's. But I think it helped families a lot. I think it massively helped people who've got young children. It took off so much pressure. And I think that's probably given a lot of benefit to parents, especially of young families with teenagers. I know that, as we spoke before, teenagers have had their own problems, but maybe for the younger children, like my son, I mean, he's nearly 13 now. And I think it's been a much better experience for him having parents who have been around a lot more than they would have been if we hadn't had been home working. As a family, I think it's been amazing. I think for people who are neurodiverse as well, it's been a godsend, because I think for people who are neurodiverse, so those with ADHD and with ASD, it's been really great for them to be able to mix it up and have a bit more time where they're in a quieter environment and they're not having to mix with other people all the time. And I think it's been a godsend. And maybe for introverts as well, you know.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, I think it has brought challenges, as we know, because one of the biggest things that affected people's mental health, there's two, aren't there? Screens and devices are a massive issue. And the other one is lack of connection. And then that feeds into, but it's not just about working from home, the fact that the way that our lives are designed, that we're losing community and we've lost community.
Yeah.
So it's a double-edged sword, isn't it, really? And I do welcome inviting people to go back into the office, because I think that helps people to connect, and that's great for your mental health. But I think allowing people to have flexi working options is the most compassionate thing we can do, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got to work for everyone.
What do you think?
Yeah, it's going to probably not make sense because we work fully remotely. But I think people should be in the office. But the only reason we don't have an office is because there's two of us, and my colleague lives in Leicester.
Doesn't make sense.
But I do promote. I think flexible working works best, but I also do think I sometimes, partly why I go work in co-working spaces, I go work in coffee shops sometimes, because you want. For me, it's about having that noise, that interaction, seeing people. Whether you speak to them or not, I don't think it really matters. You can hear someone having a conversation, and it makes you feel like you're in that space.
It's amazing. Well, we're social beings, you know, we live in a society. That's how it's meant to work. And if you put people in isolation, then they're like caged animals. We are going to end up getting stressed and distressed. So I'm with you. I do like that. And working for myself, that's the bit I miss the most. So when I go and
100%. I'm the same, but we would just have an office and no one in it, so it'd be pointless, really. On a business sense, it makes zero business sense right now. But if we move forward over the next few years, who knows? Maybe. If it works for us. I definitely think that's co-working spaces. If you do work at home, I do think you should go and check out your local co-working space and spend a few days there a week at least.
Definitely. You know, keep in contact with people. It's key. Absolutely key to mental health is that contact. 100%.
Yeah, no, spot on. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Rachel. It's been awesome. Really enjoyed this.
That was my very first podcast, so thank you for making it so easy. Well, I fear I may have talked too much, but thank you so much. That was really great, Josh.
No, brilliant. Thank you.